So from a global perspective, artists in other countries don't even have that. As they are creating, when Tuli was saying she doesn't have a studio, in other countries they'll be intimidated. Sometimes when artists are creating, they will be censored in terms of what they are creating. It's not like some of these instances don't take place here, but when you're looking at it from a cost-benefit analysis, Namibia is a lot ahead in terms of the indicators, in terms of freedom, and where we are right now. So please, Namibia, give yourself a round of applause. Okay, so my section really deals with definitions of socio and economic rights. Just to help you understand the convention, there are two parts. The part that Olin talks about is freedom of artistic expression. That really has to do with your right to life. Like, can you move? Can you associate? Can you speak up freedom? The second part that I'm dealing with has to deal a large part with your livelihood. Right? And so what that means is the right to freedom of expression, because you don't have a livelihood if you don't create. Right? So it's freedom of expression, the right to access, equity, equitable distribution, is it democratic, innovation, and how do we use internationalism? So for instance, the 2005 convention or the ILO, Dignity for Decent Work, how does that shape our local context when it comes to social and economic rights? The 2005 convention, as well as the 1980 recommendations concerning the status of the artist, or the artist's core indicators for artist freedom, require policies and measures that promote and protect liberties and of creation, expression, and participation in cultural life. So that's basically the value chain. To say, oh, when this person is creating, because when you're creating it for somewhere else generally, you were that rehearsal, whatever phase, then you are, from your creation, you're moving on to expression, which is standing on stage now and expressing yourself, and through that, participating, whether it's through your income that you're getting, that's the value chain in the creative sector. So the protection must not just be while you're expressing. The protection must run from creation to expression to participation. And those are the indicators that we'll say, okay, it's not limited in terms of cultural life. The social and economic rights include accessing decent work and mitigating the loss of income while exercising freedom of expression. So that's the kind of, there's like a Venn diagram. Freedom of expression here, socio-economic rights here, but in the middle, there's a thing that they share, and the thing that they share is decent work. Because decent work has got to do with your life, with occupational health and safety, sexual harassment, and all of those things outside of the workplace, and it also has to do with your livelihood, which comes from the social security, where at the worst case, are you protected if you fall pregnant, if you are injured, if you have a loss of income, when you pass away, can your children access all of these issues? That's what we are talking about. Okay, this work of precarious work is the biggest issue when it comes to formalizing the cultural sector. The precarious work means that there's no one way, like, like construction guys, they work, they go to the construction site. There's a one way, that's the majority that takes place. The problem in the creative sector is many ways to make income, which makes the nature of your employment very difficult. Many workers are faced with unexpected bouts of illness, for instance, also, and injury, along with the possibility of unemployment that can strike at any time. People are like, what do you mean? I'm like, think about a dancer. Dancers are exposed to possibility of injury all the time. When they can't go into production and then they have to go on crutches, what income is subsidized in that injury that is sustained as a possible dancer on these stages? Income can be lost and opportunities lacking. Wage pact, oops. Yeah, here we go. Income can be lost and opportunities lacking. Wage patterns are irregular and access to decent work is not readily available. That's the challenge. So in our country, yes, there's creative sector, but access to decent work for creatives is not readily available. Therefore, we're having a social dialogue to say, how do we make sure that creatives and cultural practitioners have social protection? So, social rights are referred to the right of adequate social security protection, to protection against lack of work-related income especially during times of pregnancy or injury, like I used the example of dancing, of the breaking of a leg by a dancer. The implementation of the social and economic rights of artists and cultural professionals requires a definition of the formal professional status. What that means is, before we even start anywhere from today on, if we want to move on in the sector, we have to have codified codes for an author. And you'll see this in the paper that's way more extensive. Internationally, an author has an ISD code. So you'll say that career is coded. So before we even start understanding how social protection, because the nature of work for a dancer is different from a literature writer, that is different from a cultural professional. So we have to codify the professions first so that we have an understanding of what is the spectrum that we are dealing with, and it makes it easier for labor, for Social Security Commission, once the professions are codified. So if you say, what's the next step? Is we have to have a formal professional status, which means that occurs through the codification of various careers. There are existing international codes for various professions, and we can then mirror and benchmark on those so that we're in line with those systems. And then we can say, it gives us, oh, these people work 80 hours under these conditions, and therefore we can protect them like this. These ones work in the rural area, in the fields making baskets, they need this type of protection, and so we can then disaggregate and make it very specific. So that way, once we codify it, we know what is the nature of employment. Are you sitting in the village weaving the basket? Are you rehearsing at the NTN? Are you drawing with the gallery? Are you working with a private player? Those are the issues that we really want to look at. And I think, most importantly, when we're talking about decent work, in the breakdown, asking what is decent work, it really has to do with employment opportunities. It has to do with remuneration. When you are getting paid, it has to do with social protection. It has to do with how private players are treating artists, so it's not just government's responsibility. If somebody hires you, do they pay you on time? How long do they wait? If they don't pay you, is there a grievance mechanism where you can go and say, you know what, I did this work for this many hours, I didn't get paid. Does the Ministry of Labor provide that type of a non-exploitative kind of address to that? So that's the idea and the need for social protection. It's under the pillar of decent work, which is a bigger umbrella. We're kind of working at bottom up. So we took one thing, social protection, and we throw it into the thing. The next we'll say, let's take on remuneration. Then at the end, we'll then hopefully end up with a whole body of the various aspects for decent work. Okay? So in Namibia, social protection in Namibia is often referred to as social security, and simultaneously this human right, which is important, because people think it's like a privilege. It's a right. This human right can be defined as a set of policies and programs designed to reduce and prevent poverty and vulnerability. That's why the institutions like Social Security Commission are important, because it falls, we're combining with their mandate, which is essentially preventing poverty, reducing vulnerability, and ensuring that Namibian citizens have some form of dignity and are not humiliated or dehumanized in the experience of working in the creative sector. That's what's important. It's a social safety net. So, we spoke about this, I think, a little bit earlier in the IRL presentation, because we got a lot of our literature from there. Social protection systems consist of two things generally. It's social insurance, and that are the service provisions that are usually given through a contributory scheme. So like the Social Security Commission, that is social insurance, right? It's for people who are employed at some level. And then there is social assistance. Social assistance is non-contributory tax finance, and that is usually what I think we were referring to earlier through the social protection policy under the Ministry of Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare. So there's two forms, and I think the minister referred to it in her opening speech as well. It was $750 as artists that you qualified for. That was social assistance. If you are self-employed and then you are paying both the contributory factors of employee and employer, that is social insurance. So we are saying that you need both in our system, social assistance and social insurance. And those two things form part of our social protection systems. I think this is the most important slide to understand the distinction. Okay, thank you. So, in closing, Social protection includes both social insurance and social assistance. The social security benefits are provided for former workers and their dependents. Very important here again, right? Because now the question is, oh, we had a Jackson Kayewa that passed away. What happened to his children? This is how you take care intergenerationally of artists. That's why this issue is important, because when artists pass away, who takes care of their children? It could be schemes like these that could provide that additional social safety support. And it should be based on the contribution employers and self-employed workers make towards their social protection. Entitlement to social protection benefits under social insurance schemes is determined by the type of activity, contractual relation, and labor income. Those are the preconditions if we want to speak about enhancing social insurance in Namibia. On the other hand, social assistance is given to anybody in this context, whether it is what we talk about like disability grants under the Ministry of Gender. That's part of your social protection. So your artists, are they where? If you have a child that might be disabled, are they getting the grant? Do they have access to that? Again, your dependents, if there's elder people in the house, are they accessing the pension? Because a lot of that helps you as an artist to subsidize your contribution, like Stuli was talking about. She is a breadwinner, but she's also encouraging the family members who might be disabled or accessing child welfare funds to access the social assistance funds to make the burden on her easier and her social protection. Okay, so social security policies include, basically when it comes to issues of social protection, maternity, unemployment, employment injury, sickness, old age, disability, health protection, even survivors, as the ILO was talking about, is everything that we're talking about here. That's why it's so important. Social protection through social assistance, I think we discussed this distinction. And so the challenges are, in the general context, I think they were discussed earlier, but the Namibian ones are funding and human resources constraints. So within the system is very rigid. So for again, like if you're looking at contributions from employer-employee, it's biased towards the reason why the system works for social security insurance in Namibia is because the responsibility lies on the employer to collect, to whatever, to distribute. Now, if you're self-employed, you'll have to almost carry the responsibility so that you can benefit in that instance as well. So that's why we say the HR constraints within your own internal setup as your own, like every artist as a startup, how do you set that up affects it. Inadequate coverage and adequacy of social protection. Again, if you look at the benefit structures of how much you benefit, it's got to do with the contributions. And then so when the ILO was saying the benefits are subject to how strong the social protection system is in the country, this is the relationship here that it affects. Namibia has a food and nutrition insecurity. So how does that even make artists and everybody else more vulnerable? Artists can't reinvest their income because they have to meet their primary needs of nutrition, of food, so they don't even get to the ability of reinvesting their income into their particular art. Poverty and high inequality, that's obvious. High cost of healthcare, because there is no social protection when an artist finds themselves in these instances. They have to pay a lot of their money towards the healthcare that can offset their income. Inadequate health insurance, people with disabilities, retirement insecurity and reliance on old age pensions. These are all the issues that are affecting the Namibian context currently. So here it is, and there are some of the solutions. If you're talking about illness, what can we do? We can promote health insurance, maternity cover, family responsibilities, family allowance and childcare, disability, we can have disability insurance programs with disability, old age pensions, occupational work injury insurance, death, we can have with life insurance and survivor's pension, extreme poverty can have social safety nets, guaranteed employment, cash and in-kind transfers, unemployment benefits, and skills during those periods that are off. How do we do that? And then also emergency relief for artists that live in areas where there might be floods or natural disasters. So those are just some of the suggestions in the Namibian context. But I think the takeaway is we need both social assistance and we need to make artists and creators aware about the existing social assistance systems in the country. And at the same time, we need to create an enabling environment for social insurance by making the pathway to that flexible. So if you read our paper, our biggest recommendation is to say that Because of the irregular income of artists, you can't have the precondition be like a monthly model with a regular income, because that excludes a large part of the artists, because they might be able to make one movie and get enough money to contribute for an annual contribution. So I think the flexibilities in the models is what's going to give artists more access to social protection. Thank you.